When Joel Osteen, a well-known televangelist, broke the devastating news to his millions of followers,
Joel Osteen preaches about your best life now, but his own empire is crumbling. The Hurricane Harvey disaster showed his true colors when he refused to help flood victims. The church shooting exposed dangerous security gaps. Financial records revealed they spend more on TV broadcasts than helping the poor. Other pastors say he's not even preaching Christianity anymore. Meanwhile, the sources close to the family say there's another crisis brewing that could end his ministry forever. Here's everything going wrong with Joel Osteen. Joel Osteen was born on March 5, 1963, in Houston, Texas. He wasn't born into an ordinary family. He was one of 6 children in a home built on faith and big dreams. His father, John Osteen, had once been a traditional Southern Baptist pastor, but that changed just 4 years before Joel was born. In 1959, John left behind the old ways and started something new, what would become Lakewood Church. The Osteen family wasn't just busy, they were focused. His mother, Dodie, stood right beside John through every high and low. Joel grew up watching his parents handle challenges with faith. When his sister Lisa was born in 1958 with severe disabilities, it shook the family. But it also became a turning point. John and Dodie leaned hard into faith healing, and that shift became the heartbeat of their church. Joel had siblings who followed different paths, but each played a role in the family's growing influence. Lisa would go on to become an associate pastor at Lakewood. His brother Paul became a vascular surgeon and also served as a missionary. Their lives were rooted in service, shaped by early moments of hardship and deep belief. The story of Lakewood Church begins in the most unexpected way. In May 1959, on Mother's Day, John and Dodie opened the doors of a church inside an old feed store on the northeast side of Houston. It had just 234 seats. They called it Lakewood Baptist Church at first, but that name didn't stay long. The Baptist part was dropped, and the church became a place for people who believed in miracles and healing. By the end of the 1970s, Lakewood had over 5,000 members. It had become a movement. Joel wasn't interested in preaching, at least not at first. He was quiet, even shy. In 1981, he graduated from Humble High School in the Houston area. He didn't stand out because of his voice or charisma. He stood out because he stayed behind the scenes. After high school, he went to Oral Roberts University in Oklahoma to study radio and television communications. But he didn't finish. After less than a year, he dropped out. It wasn't because he lacked direction. It was because he already knew what he wanted to do. In 1982, when Joel was just 19, he came back to Houston. He wasn't planning to preach. Instead, he focused on something very few churches at the time understood: television. He launched Lakewood's TV ministry from scratch. One local station, one national cable channel. That was the beginning. For the next 17 years, Joel poured himself into that work. He filmed, he edited, he even tracked what his father wore on stage. He made sure every broadcast looked perfect. He believed the church's message should be just as polished as anything on network TV. His choice to skip college and dive into media wasn't a failure. It was a setup. Joel helped make Lakewood Church a household name before ever stepping behind the pulpit. He stayed out of the spotlight, but he was shaping how the world saw Lakewood, one broadcast at a time. At home, Joel lived in a world full of faith. His parents were more than pastors. They were examples. In 1981, his mother, Dodie, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The doctors gave up, but the family didn't. Dodie survived, and that moment became part of their message. Never stop believing. Prayer and positivity weren't just words. They were a way of life in the Osteen house. Even though Joel worked behind the camera, he was absorbing everything. He saw what worked. He saw how his father inspired people. Over time, he developed his own ideas, shaped not by seminary, but by editing hundreds of hours of sermons. He was learning without even realizing it. He never planned to preach. His father asked him many times. Each time, Joel said no. "Daddy, you're the preacher," he used to say. "Who can preach better than you?" But something changed in January 1999. That month, Joel finally agreed to speak. On January 17th, he gave his first sermon. He was nervous. He spoke fast. He shared family stories and jokes. He just wanted to connect. He didn't know what was coming. Just 6 days later, his father passed away from a sudden heart attack. It was a shock. Joel's first sermon turned out to be the last one his father would ever hear. John's death left a hole in the church. Lakewood had over 6,000 members and no clear successor. Joel had no experience preaching, no theological degree, and no real training. But the people looked to him. And even though he was grieving, even though he never wanted the role, Joel stepped forward. On June 7, 1999, less than half a year after his father's passing, Joel Osteen was officially installed as Lakewood Church's senior pastor. He had only preached a handful of times, but something had clicked. People responded. The church began to grow fast. Within just 5 years, that crowd of 6,000 had more than tripled. By 2004, the church was pulling between 25,000 and 30,000 people every single week. Lakewood had become the biggest church in the entire country. That didn't happen by accident. Joel doubled the church's spending on TV airtime. He fought for better time slots in major cities. He put Lakewood's name on billboards. And he made sure his sermons were uplifting and easy to follow. That mix of hope, media, and message turned Lakewood into something much bigger than just a local church. It was on the move. The original 8,000-seat sanctuary couldn't keep up. So Joel started thinking big. He wasn't shy about it either. He said out loud that one day Lakewood might welcome 100,000 people every weekend. At the time, that sounded almost ridiculous. But looking at how fast things were growing, it didn't feel impossible. Then came the boldest move of all. In 2003, Lakewood signed a 30-year lease on the Compaq Center. That was the old home of the Houston Rockets, the same arena where NBA championships were once won. Lakewood paid $12 million for the lease, with the option to extend it later for another 30 years at $22 million. But the real shock came with the renovation. The church committed to spending between $90 million and $95 million to completely transform the arena. In today's money, that's about $158 million. They didn't just slap on a few lights and call it a day. They tore the place apart. 5 new stories were added inside. Classrooms, media rooms, carpeting stretched for miles, indoor waterfalls. The place was rebuilt from the inside out. It took more than 15 months to finish. And in 2010, Lakewood bought the building outright for $7.5 million. Then came the big day. On July 16, 2005, Lakewood opened the doors to its brand new home. Every one of the 16,000 seats was full. Millions more watched from home. People who used to sit in that arena to watch basketball were now there to pray. Everything had changed. Attendance passed 40,000. TV viewers reached around 10 million across more than 100 countries. What had started as a small church in Northeast Houston was now a global powerhouse sitting in the middle of Greenway Plaza. But it wasn't just the building or the crowds. It was Joel's message. He didn't preach about sin or judgment like many others. He focused on something else: positivity, gratitude, self-worth. His sermons felt more like motivation than warnings. Some critics called it Christian light. Others said it lacked depth, but people showed up anyway. They tuned in, they read his books, and they kept coming back. When he released Your Best Life Now in October 2004, no one expected it to blow up the way it did. By December, just 3 months later, it had sold over 500,000 copies. In May 2005, it passed the 1 million mark. It stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for more than 200 weeks straight. That's almost 4 years. Today, it has sold over 4 million copies worldwide. Joel wasn't just preaching anymore. He was building a brand. He didn't take a salary from Lakewood after 2005. But he didn't need to. His books, 15 and counting, brought in millions. Just one of them, Become a Better You, made him $13 million. His live speaking events packed arenas. He could make between $100,000 and $200,000 for a single appearance. His merchandise sold in bulk. Books, CDs, clothes, gifts. He even turned his massive social media following, 25 million on Facebook, 10 million on Twitter, 5 million on Instagram, into another stream of revenue. Together, Joel and Victoria built a personal fortune, estimated at $100 million. In 2013, Joel launched his Night of Hope tour. This wasn't just another church service. It was a paid event. He booked NBA-sized arenas across the country. Tickets went for around $15 each. On March 11, 2013, he filled the American Airlines Arena in Miami. That building holds over 20,000 people. The tour kept growing. By 2019, it had reached London's Wembley Arena. And in 2017 alone, Lakewood spent $6.7 million on these events. Joel's approach to media was also different. Instead of limiting himself to Christian TV networks, he went mainstream. He showed up on Oprah. He sat down with Larry King. He appeared on Good Morning America. He reached people who had never stepped foot in a church. His 2005 interview on Larry King Live made waves. His talks with Oprah helped reshape how people viewed his message. He wasn't just a pastor anymore. He was a motivational figure for anyone, religious or not. His message was simple. Be hopeful. Believe in better. Keep going. It connected with millions. Today, the Osteen brand brings in about $55 million a year. But here's something that catches a lot of people off guard. Out of Lakewood's $90 million annual budget, only about $1.2 million goes to missions and outreach. That's just 1.3%. Most of the money goes to running the weekly services, which cost $31.7 million, and the TV ministry, which takes up another $25.1 million. Night of Hope gets $6.7 million. The rest goes to staff, administration, and fundraising. For a lot of people, that breakdown raises eyebrows. A church this big, this wealthy, giving so little to traditional charity work? It makes some uncomfortable. But at the same time, others point to the scale of impact. Millions hear the message every week. Millions read the books. And thousands walk through the doors of a building that once echoed with basketball cheers, but now fills with prayer and hope. Joel Osteen wasn't planning anything special the day he walked into a small jewelry store in Houston. It was just about replacing a watch battery. That's all. But standing behind the counter was Victoria Osteen, a young psychology student working at her mother's store. That one moment, April of 1985, would change everything. 2 years later, on April 4, 1987, they were married. At the time, Joel was still working quietly behind the scenes in his father's ministry. He wasn't on stage, he wasn't a celebrity, and Victoria, though raised in a home filled with faith, wasn't aiming for a life in the spotlight either. Her father was a NASA engineer who helped build the Saturn rocket. Her mother taught Sunday school. They were a family built on science and belief, structure and faith. That simple meeting in a store led to a partnership that now touches millions. For nearly 40 years, Joel and Victoria have stood side by side, guiding Lakewood Church through both admiration and controversy. What began with a tiny watch battery turned into a movement watched around the world. Victoria's own journey is just as surprising. She was born in Huntsville, Alabama in 1961, but her family moved to Houston when she was only 2. Her father had taken a job at NASA. Her early life was shaped by quiet routines and steady church traditions. When she met Joel, she had no idea she'd become a leading voice in one of the biggest churches in America. At first, she kept things simple, helping with offerings, managing background tasks. But in 2003, she started something big, the Lakewood Church Women's Ministry. That small start turned into something that now reaches thousands every year. Over time, her presence on stage grew stronger, her words broadcast across networks, her image streamed into homes. Then came her book. In 2008, she released Love Your Life, which debuted at number 2 on the New York Times bestsellers list. Its first print run? A massive 750,000 copies. She went from clerk to co-pastor, from quiet helper to a key figure in American faith, and she did it with calm confidence. Joel and Victoria's children were born right into this growing whirlwind. Jonathan came first, on April 20th, 1995. Alexandra followed on November 9th, 1998. As Lakewood's influence expanded, so did the spotlight on their kids. But both of them stepped into that space in their own way. Jonathan studied film at the University of Texas at Austin, graduating in 2017. Even before that, he was already leading worship. By 2016, he and Alexandra were performing together for crowds as large as 45,000. One of those nights was America's Night of Hope in San Francisco. Jonathan didn't stop at music. He also became a songwriter and music producer, writing pieces for Lakewood's young adult albums. In 2019, he preached his first sermon on Father's Day. That moment marked a shift. From singer to speaker, Alexandra, too, stayed close to the heart of the ministry. She became a lead vocalist in Lakewood's worship band, El Waya. Their music began to spread fast online. Songs like I've Got a Fire reached hundreds of thousands on Spotify. The Osteen children weren't just riding their parents' wave, they were steering part of it, shaping the church's music and youth ministries in ways that connected with a new generation. Behind all this, though, there's something deeper going on. A message that's drawn millions, but also stirred a firestorm of criticism. Joel Osteen's preaching style, his theology, and the message he shares each week are closely tied to the word of faith and prosperity gospel movements. These teachings promise that faith can bring health, wealth, and success. Joel's version of that is clear. God wants you to live in abundance, not struggle. He says God's will is for you to pay your bills, stay out of debt, and live free of sickness. That idea is powerful, but also controversial. Some love it. Others say it's not just wrong, it's dangerous. Traditional Christian doctrine teaches that life includes suffering, that faith isn't about getting rich, and that not everything is in your control. But prosperity preaching turns that idea around. It suggests that your words and beliefs can pull blessings into your life, like flipping a switch. Joel's church has more than 40,000 attendees each week. His sermons reach millions, and his personal wealth, estimated between $40 and $60 million, only adds fuel to the debate. Critics argue that his message risks blaming the poor for their struggles, as if not being rich or healthy means you didn't believe hard enough. They say it changes Christianity into something soft and shallow, more about feeling good than about transformation. Joel often says he wants to encourage people. He wants to lift them up. But some theologians call it Christianity without a cross. He rarely talks about sin or hell or repentance. In interviews, he's admitted he avoids those topics. He focuses on hope, on becoming the best version of yourself. That's what fills his books and sermons. Uplifting words, self-help advice, messages about living positively. But critics say that style has a cost. It skips over the hardest parts of the Christian faith. It turns salvation into self-confidence. One scholar called it a message that produces happier pagans, not true believers. Even his fellow pastors have weighed in. Michael Horton, a professor of theology, called Osteen's message cotton candy gospel. Sweet, maybe, but not nourishing. He said Joel uses the Bible like a fortune cookie, looking for happy verses and skipping the ones about suffering. Another theologian, J.I. Packer, pointed out that skipping repentance altogether is a red flag. Others agree. They say this isn't just a soft message, it's a distorted one. Some even use the word heresy. And still, people keep watching. Another point of controversy is Lakewood Church's treatment of communion and baptism. These are key parts of Christian tradition, practiced for centuries. But for a long time, some said Lakewood barely did either. They claimed that baptisms were rare, and communion wasn't a regular part of Sunday services. In a church this large, that raised eyebrows and questions. Things have shifted, though. On April 26, 2025, Joel baptized hundreds of people during a large church event. So it's not that the practices are gone, it's that they're not always front and center. Communion is still affirmed in the church's beliefs. It's encouraged. It just might not happen every week, like it does in other churches, but the perception that it's missing hasn't gone away. To some, it's another sign that the deeper traditions of faith are being traded for something simpler, something easier to sell. Back in July 2020, while the world was deep in the chaos of COVID-19, Lakewood Church made a move that left many stunned. The church, led by Joel Osteen and known as the biggest megachurch in America, took a $4.4 million loan from the federal Paycheck Protection Program. This program was meant to help small businesses and nonprofits keep their staff paid during the shutdowns. But Lakewood wasn't exactly small. It had an annual budget of nearly $90 million, and its pastor was worth somewhere between $50 and $100 million. People didn't take the news lightly. The loan was one of the largest handed out in Houston that month, covering the pay and benefits of around 370 staff members, while in-person services were on hold for 7 months. As the backlash grew, so did the pressure. Critics said this blurred the line between church and state. Finally, in October 2021, Lakewood agreed to pay it all back. They insisted neither Joel nor his wife Victoria saw a single dollar from that loan. But the damage was done. The controversy sparked a national debate about how megachurches handled their money and their place in government aid programs. But if that raised eyebrows, what came next left people speechless. In one of its financial reports, Lakewood revealed it was spending just $1.2 million on missions and outreach. Out of a $90 million annual budget, that's only 1.3%. For a church that size, it was shocking. People usually donate expecting their money to help the community, not fuel a media empire. Yet Lakewood spent $25.1 million on their TV broadcasts and $31.7 million on weekly services and programs. They dropped another $6.7 million on events called Night of Hope, and over $11 million went to administration and fundraising each. That kind of spending painted a clear picture. Lakewood wasn't just a church, it was a brand, and the focus seemed to be more on growing that brand than helping people in need. Still, Joel Osteen has always been quick to point out that he doesn't take a salary from the church. He stopped collecting one back in 2004 or 2005, but he doesn't need to. His net worth sits somewhere between $50 and $100 million. That money didn't come from church donations, it came from his books, his speaking tours, and all the merchandise tied to his name. His first book, Your Best Life Now, came out in 2004. It sold more than 4 million copies and spent nearly 4 years on the New York Times bestseller list. His second book brought in around $13 million in royalties and advances alone. Joel and Victoria live in a mansion in Houston that's over 17,000 square feet. They bought it for $10.5 million in 2010, and today it's worth as much as $16 million. They also own a second home, valued at about $3 million. In 1 year, they paid nearly $250,000 just in property taxes. So while Joel might not be on the church payroll, there's no denying he's made a fortune from his platform. Some admire it. Others see it as proof that something's deeply wrong. And then there's the lawsuit. In 2011, a New York-based band called the